Welcome to the 4th and 4 podcast, sponsored by Inside the Leather. Custom putter covers. Search Inside the Leather. Shop on Etsy. Use promo code podcast at checkout to save 20% on your purchase. I'm Donald Lawrence. Our guest today is the head man at Northbrook High School in Houston, Texas. He played high school football for Katy Tigers under the legendary Mike Johnson. Coach Andres Gomez, welcome to the podcast, Coach.
Thanks, Donald. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Let's jump right into it. I got a segment that I like to start mine with called Starting Hot. You spent your childhood growing up in Mexico. Who are the top 3 Mexican athletes of all time?
I thought about this, and my first response was, number one, Julio Cesar Chavez, the boxer, just dominant, for decades.
107, 6, and 2.
Yeah.
107, 6, and 2 with 86 knockouts, Coach.
That's right. Yeah, so he's number one. Hugo Sanchez is a Mexican soccer player, and he was a longtime player for the national team. He became a manager. He was a kid that we all wanted to be growing up. And then, of course, Fernando Valenzuela, pitcher for the Dodgers in the 80s. And, really kind of redefined what it meant to be a Mexican athlete at the highest level. I mean, when I thought about this list, I thought, those names kind of came pretty quickly, and I kind of had to check myself. I was like, is it just because I was, born in 1980? I mean, because they were all in their prime, and in the 80s and early 90s, but I mean, I think historically you look back, and I mean, those 3 are about as good as it gets as far as Mexican athletes.
So when I was growing up, one of my best friends just happened to be Larry Dierker's son. Mm-hmm. So him and I would always go to the Astro games, and that was when Hideki Nomo was big into the Dodgers. And I remember my dad telling me about Fernando Mania and how that was the only thing he had ever seen that was close to what was going on with Nomo at that time. And Nomo had that nasty split finger, and Fernando was a big, strong, powerful lefty. I do have to – I'm glad you threw Fernando in there because he's probably the most famous, I would say, outside of Julio Cesar Chavez. And then you had a soccer player. And then I just want to put a honorable mention in there for Lorena Ochoa. So Lorena Ochoa, the golfer, 158 weeks at number 1, retired at 28. Just burned out, man. At 28, retired. But you hit the nail on the head with those.
Yeah, that's, as I said, she's another impressive one that like you said, who knows what could have been if she had kept going.
I can't imagine a sport like golf and tennis where it's not a team sport. You're your own team. So when you're that talented at age 15, 16, basically you're the CEO of your own company. Mm-hmm. And the only people you really have to lean on are adults that are maybe looking out for your best interest, but trying to gain as much monetary compensation as possible. I bet that is very difficult in a individual sport.
And then there's probably not too many, role models or mentors that can guide you that have been there, that have been in your shoes, because it's such a rare thing for somebody to be that talented. And so it's got to be a pretty lonely situation to have to navigate through that.
Absolutely. What experiences did you have in your childhood? We mentioned earlier that you grew up in Mexico that sparked your interest in football, and go through learning the game in your youth to playing for the Katy Tigers.
So we came here when I was 9 years old from Mexico, and it was unexpected. My dad was just looking for work, and he came over here to find a job, and we stayed there for about 9 months, and that next summer he kind of, my parents just said, hey, we're going on vacation, and 30 years later we still haven't gone back from our vacation. But when we came here, we were just casual fans, just like everybody in Mexico. We watched the NFL here and there, and we all just kind of got to choose our favorite team. I'm a big Chicago Bears fan because the first game I remember watching was the '85 Super Bowl, and I mean, of course, they dominated in that era, and so we said we were all just casual fans. I have 2 older brothers, and they kind of. My oldest brother is the one that kind of really got into it. He was the first one at everything. So he got into 7th grade and he started playing football. He said we were in Katy ISD, where it was Memorial Junior High. He's the one that kind of got into football, and then we all just would go watch his games and kind of start getting into it. And and that's how we developed the familiarity of it. And then also, uh, the era that we lived in, we had these iconic video games, and we had the Nintendo growing up, and Super Nintendo came out, and we had Tecmo Bowl, we had the early Madden games, and I remember that's how we learned a lot of rules and some of the little key details was because when rainy day we couldn't go outside, so we'd stay inside and play video games against each other. I remember them, the old Bo Jackson, and on Tecmo Bowl, and all those classic things that we all kind of remember, and those kind of really set us on that trajectory. And then once we started playing, then it just became just an addiction, just like everything else. We just wanted to keep learning, wanted to keep growing. We were fortunate to go into a community like Katy. I think about a lot how what might have happened if we moved to a different part of town. Like if because my parents just we had no connections to Katy. We just kind of that's just where we found a place to live, and we could have been in Pasadena or Aldine or wherever we could have ended up, and who knows what it might have been like. But growing up in Katy, when we were in middle school, that was all you did. You and your friends they'd give us a little sports pass, and we'd go to the varsity games. And I remember, I think it was the '92 season was the first time that I started going to almost every game, because that's just what you did. And I mean, I can still tell you some of the players that were on that team, and some of the games, memorable games that we went to, because that was just such an exciting time. That's when Katy was just starting to become the Katy that we know now. It was Coach Johnson was there since the early '80s, and they had some rough times early on, and there were some key teams. We all knew the history. The '86 team was the first time they went 10-0, and then the '89 team that they were in the playoffs again. And then my freshman year, '94, was the first time they went to a state championship since the 1950s, and that was again showing up. You're a freshman, and all of a sudden you see the varsity team. I remember we lost the first game against Klein, and then won 13 in a row to get to the championship game against Plano, and lost that one at Kyle Field. But it just, for me, especially because of the time frame in which I was there, it just seemed like that's just the way it happened. Like you slowly built your team up, and then you hit these peaks, and again, for me, it just worked out perfectly. That in '94, my freshman year, went to a state championship, lost, and by the time I was a senior in '97, we won the first one of the modern era, and I said, and Katy hasn't looked back since.
Couple things off of that, Coach. Number one, do you still play Madden?
I haven't in a couple of years.
Oh, you got to get back into it.
Yeah.
You got to get back into it. That's my guilty pleasure, man. I'm actually in a Madden franchise league with 7 other coaches,
Oh wow.
and it's competitive, and we play head to head. And so if you play each other head to head, it's $5, and then whoever wins the Super Bowl, everyone's got to pay them 10. So it turns out to be a pretty good payday at the end of the
Nice.
day.
Yeah, that sounds good to
And
get
then
into.
one thing that was really kind of unique. So my mom is an Aggie. She was going to vet school at A&M in the early '80s, and my dad was coaching at A&M Consolidated when they met. Before that, my dad was actually offense coordinator, O-line coach at Monterey
Oh,
Tech,
okay.
and this is in the late '70s. And he loved it. In fact, when I first got into coaching, he wanted me to go down there to do it before high school ball because he liked it so much. So in '76, they win the Mexican college equivalent of the national championship, right? They're playing at the stadium in Mexico City. And he said it was about 4 hours before they could load the bus because everybody in Mexico City with a beer bottle was chunking it at their locker room before they could get there.
Wow, that's about right.
So I grew up with a man. I wish I still had it. I think I gave it back to him, and he lives in Cabo now.
Right.
So I hope he still has it. But I grew up with the newspaper article that was framed of the whole thing, pictures of the
Yeah.
game, pictures of them trying to leave, interviews and stuff. It was
Wow,
really cool.
that's amazing.
Did you realize when you were a player on the '97 championship team that that was going to be the beginning of what's become a 25-year dynasty?
I didn't. as I said, I thought that that's just the way it was, and I remember that when, our very first practice as freshmen, we were all together. They called us up at the end, and Coach Kent Bruno was the linebackers coach at the time, and he was kind of over the freshman program, and he looked at us and he said, "You guys need to start planning on winning a state championship when you're seniors." And again, I believed it, and I don't know how many of my teammates, took that to heart the way I did, but to me, that's just the way it was. You show up, you work hard, you win a championship, and you build a program that way. And from that day until the day we got our championship rings, in that spring of '98, it seemed like everything was just kind of destined to be that way. And obviously, when uh, we left and came back and saw the way the next season happened, the way the next couple of years, where I mean, it just kept going. We realized, okay, like it was pretty special to be part of that. But at the time, said no, we never thought we always thought that we were special. I think, and that maybe it was just everything kind of lining up for us. But clearly, it was just a result of just the many years of hard work, of consistent effort, and everything that Coach Johnson, Coach Joseph, and those coaches had put into place. Because I got a very rude awakening when I got into coaching and realized that not everybody does things the way Katie does, or not everybody runs the program so efficiently or has the same procedures and processes established the way that they do. Because everywhere you go, people want to copy that model. They say, hey, well, let's do what Katie does, and even we don't have Katie kids, but let's try to do some of the things that they do and see if we can mirror at least part of that success. And it's just it has been building for so long. Like I said, going back to the '80s, it wasn't like we were the ones that started it. We just continued what was already set in motion before we got there.
Right. So Coach Gonzalez over at Sam Rayburn was kind of talking about this, modeling his stuff after the Katie model, or the Katie Paytel model that he learned over at Paytel under Coach Gott. And I think it's one of those things that it's easy to say, but it's a lot more difficult to do. And I remember hearing early in my coaching career about the Katie staff kind of putting on inner staff clinics as soon as July 4th was over, right? And just the time and the grind and the attention to detail. And it's a lot easier to say than it is to do.
Yep.
And I think you can take some of those principles, but at the end of the day, if you're the head man, you got to make it your own. You got to account for the families that you're responsible for within your staff, and you got to model it and then figure out ways that's going to fit your staff, your clientele, your personnel the best ability.
Absolutely.
My favorite high school game of all time, 97 quarterfinal game between Katie and Eisenhower at Rice Stadium. Before that, I would go to the Dome, and I talked to Coach Creech about this on one of my earlier episodes of the podcast about going to the Dome all day on Saturdays in November and December, watching Yates, watching Eisenhower, watching the Elsick Rams, watching the Hastings Bears, PNG, all those squads. And this was the first time, and I don't know, my dad's not a wimp by any means, but we didn't go to a lot of outdoor games, in November, if you know what I mean. All right, we were always at the Dome. But we went to Rice Stadium, Katie Eisenhower, 1997. What do you remember about that game?
It was a beautiful setting. I remember it was a very sunny, perfect weather Saturday afternoon, Rice Stadium, and I remember that we seen that we read the scouting reports and just thought, okay, like this is dangerous team. That they got a lot of weapons, but we had very similar philosophies as far as we play good defense, control the ball, run the football, and don't make mistakes. And so that was, it was a slugfest. I mean, I remember every yard mattered, everything that both teams did, it was just hard hitting, and, just back and forth the whole time. And I remember we took the lead late and they got the ball, and they ran a very very efficient, very effective option attack, and they were driving the ball on us, and I remember it almost a fluke where the quarterback kept it, came around the edge, and as he tried to break a tackle, one of our linebackers hit him right on the football, and it popped on the ground, and one of our safeties just happened to be right there, bounced right in his lap. He fell on it, and that sealed the game. And we won 21-17. Um, and later on in my career, I was fortunate to work with some of the coaches. Coach Pat Patterson was head coach at Eisenhower at the time, and he went on to Tomball. And I worked for him my second, third years coaching, and he still had a lot of the coaches from that Eisenhower staff on there. And I remember, and they've told me, when they found out that I was part of that Katy team, they said, they knew that the winner of that game was going to win the state championship. They accused me of stealing their rings because they said that game. I mean, there was the atmosphere, just everything about it was just, it was championship game atmosphere. Um, and we all kind of knew that was two of the great teams of the Houston area in the '90s at that point. And um, I said it was, um, we did it. We did just enough to get the victory. I said, but it could have gone either way. It was that close. Um, but great memory, great. I said everything about it. Just Eisenhower came out in their all black uniforms. As intimidating as could be, and like I said, we were able to slug it out with them. So lot of fun, a lot of excitement in the stadium that day.
So I think it was 14-13 at
Mm-hmm.
half, right? And I don't think Eisenhower scores in the second half. And uh, a guy you played with is one of my good friends, uh, Rusty
Yep.
Busey, and he is like, to get anything about Katy or Katy football out of him, just talking to him is like pulling teeth, man. Like that's just a part of what he did and who he was and what he was all about. He doesn't talk about it much, but if you get a chance to talk to him about it, he'll open up. And that is the one game. That's the one game where he felt like everything that he did football wise came out kind of at halftime, and he played the best half that he could possibly play in the second
Yep.
half. And I think it all came out there. You guys go on to win the state championship. He went on to Texas Tech, ends up having a couple
Yep.
injuries, doesn't work out, ends up getting a degree from there. But, there's no regrets for that guy. And what I love about that guy is, if you didn't know that he was a part of that, like, he's just a laid back
Mm-hmm.
guy. And then he just has a switch, man.
Yeah.
So I've really enjoyed getting to know him, and I've had a chance to work with him twice now, at Langham Creek and at Pearland, and I love that dude
Yeah,
to death.
he was. I mean, he was the unquestioned leader of that team. At that time, I mean, he was the make a big play and get in somebody's face. I mean, he was all over the field. He was Houston area player of the year for the Houston. I
Yeah, it
mean,
was.
and like I said, at that time, I mean, that's just that was who he was. I mean, he knew that he was the best player on the field, and he was going to let you know about it, and and everybody just kind of followed his lead, and a lot of respect for him. And like I said, and we all just assumed that he was going to go do big things at Texas Tech because he was just that kind of a player. So it was unfortunate to see the injuries cut his career short, and what might have been. But yeah, no, he was definitely a guy you wanted on your team.
For sure, for sure. The head coach at Northbrook, the Raiders, and I want to dive into this, man. In 2021, you received one of 15 UIL Sponsor Excellence Awards. That's for the whole
Mm-hmm.
state, and that's not just for athletics. What do you and your staff do in your program to deserve such a special honor?
I mean, the biggest thing I think that we try to do was to change the perception from within. I think there was. I said I got there and I had all these expectations, and hey, this is what we can do. We're gonna put this in place, and and then of course, I was introduced on a Thursday, and it happened to be in March of 2020 when, we had a little introduction ceremony for me. Then I met with the principal and AD that afternoon, and then as I was driving home, they called and said, "Hey, we're canceling school for tomorrow. This COVID thing's getting out of control. We'll go into spring break. Hope it dies down, and then we'll come back after spring break and regroup." And then, of course, the rest is history. We didn't. I didn't. I was interviewing coaches over the phone, and trying to meet players through text and phone calls and emails. And I mean, it was just something that was um, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. But as we slowly came back, I started asking the kids, just what it was like, just kind of getting their feedback as to some of the things that because I didn't get to see what the program looked like. I didn't really, I walked through the weight room one time for about 5 minutes when I was getting a tour of the school. So I didn't see all the ins and outs that I wanted to. My plan was to come in and evaluate, kind of sit back and watch how things were done for a few days, uh, and then make a plan based on that. Didn't get to do that. So when we came back, we started asking the kids, what's it like? What is the experience like? And some of them said that that they just had this. They've been losing football games for so long that everybody just kind of took for granted that they were even part of the team. And they said that it was hard that they were having to battle within their own school. They said that sometimes after a game, they would, go to class and they had teachers, mocking them or laughing at them, making fun of them for what the score was or for, what happened at the game. And it broke my heart. It showed me that people just place a lot of value in just the things that they can see from the outside. Everybody can check the score and the Chronicle. Everybody can check their, Southwest football app and see what the final score was. But nobody goes to the practices. Nobody goes and sees how hard they work. What they do in the weight room. They don't see those things that are really positive that are happening, and they just see the big picture stuff. And so what we try to do is go in and really give them some confidence and find small bits of success wherever we could find them. Um, you know, we knew that a lot of times we were going to be outmatched on the field physically, and the scoreboard was probably wasn't going to be in our favor. Um, but we really preached controlling what we could control and saying, well, let's not go and try to be like Katy. Let's just grow our program from what we have right now to something better tomorrow. Um, we did we talked a lot about the 1% growth, 1% daily growth, where if you adjust your habits and you can grow 1% every day, then you're going to see a lot of positive changes over the course of weeks and months. And um, so one of the tangible things I did for that is I brought a little piggy bank with in the shape of a football, and I got a bunch of pennies, and I said, penny is 1% of a dollar. So every workout, everything that we do, we're going to put a penny in the piggy bank. And we made it. That was kind of a big ceremonial deal where at the end of the workout, who had a good day? Come on, come put a penny in the bank. And that was kind of our like I said, our representation of this is the work we're putting in. And every day I'd go in there and I'd shake it up and say, hey, first day, like there's one little penny in there, you can barely hear it clanging. And after a couple of days, okay, now it sounds better. And and we did that throughout the whole off season, summer. Every day I had somebody put the penny in. So by the time we got to game day, it was that was it was like a little noisemaker where we could kind of shake it up and say, hey, here's all the work you put in. It's right here. Here's the representation. And if you've really committed yourself to improving, that 1% every day, then this is what the difference that it might make. And like I said, that was one little thing that we did, just kind of show them like, hey, this the little stuff matters. The workout that you do, the showing up in the summer, strength conditioning, all that stuff, it will add up. And we may be a little bit behind, physically or in experience, some of the other schools that we have to play against, but that doesn't mean that it has to stay that way. And if we continue to grow our program, get our numbers up, keep some of our talented kids in school and in the football program, then we have a chance to turn this thing into something different, something people don't expect. And I always told them, I said, you know, as the underdog, it's really, really fun to look at the other sideline and watch somebody else panic. And because a lot of times teams show up and think, oh, it's Northbrook. We're going to be able to do whatever we want. We'll play our backups in the second half, go home, and everything's great. And there's been some games where we're able to put a drive together, or have some defensive stops where all of a sudden they start kind of you see a little bit of frustration on their sideline, and I told them, I said that's what's going to make a difference. And if we keep growing in that direction, then eventually we're going to be tied with somebody at the half, where they're going to go in the locker room and fight each other, or we're going to be in a close game in the fourth quarter where it comes down to the balance of a football, or whatever. And again, it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but as we continue to do those those little things, uh, we're going to eventually get to that point. I firmly believe that. And there's a lot of things that we have to work to overcome daily, just like everybody else does. But my thing has always been that I'm going to be positive, no matter what. And I'm going to, and especially when other people are being negative or getting down on themselves, that's when I just kind of am able to naturally rise and say, okay, well, no, let's do something different. Let's change this. Let's change our mindset. Let's think about what's going to happen next, and not what just happened. We've really, really tried to emphasize promoting positive things. And I read this in a book somewhere, and I'm a firm believer that what you focus on is what you're gonna see. And I use this example all the time. But the way it was explained to me was, it's like when you buy a new vehicle. Like I drive a red F-150. So when I bought my red F-150, I drove it off the lot, and as I'm driving home, I saw 4 or 5 different red F-150s. I was like, man, everybody else must have gotten the same truck. And and the reason is, your brain sees millions of things every second, but has to filter only the important things. And so when you just bought that car, that's important to you. Well, you start seeing those everywhere. And so I use that, and I tell the kids all the time that that's how I am with positivity. And I think if I keep putting positive things in my brain and focusing on positive things, I'm going to see that. And I'm going to look at 100 kids in the cafeteria, instead of seeing the one kid that's not throwing his trash away, or seeing the one kid that's cussing at somebody else. I'm going to see the 5 kids that are sitting there helping each other with homework, or the kids that are picking up somebody else's trash. The positive things are going to stand out when that's what you're focusing on. So we've done a lot of work to like I'm pretty active on Twitter, and recently I noticed that my Twitter feed, the things that I post, usually say thank you or congratulations. And it's usually about somebody achieving something, or somebody showing gratitude towards somebody, or something that they went out of their way to do something positive. And I believe that the more you focus on those things, the more you see them, and then it's just going to compound, and before you know it, you have no choice but to be optimistic and be positive, and see the good things that are happening.
Absolutely. I love that idea of the piggy bank, and having a visual. Like I want a clear piggy bank where they can see the pennies adding
Mm-hmm.
up, because physically you don't feel it, right? Like, man, getting stronger, getting faster, getting thicker, getting bigger, getting more explosive, man, that's a brutal
Mm-hmm.
process. Even when you're 16 and loaded with testosterone, it's still a very, very slow
Yeah.
process. And that visual of put the penny in the bank and let's see the work that we've done, and then pulling it out on game day, shaking it up, because of all these pennies, they're going to fill us tonight.
Yep.
We're going to let them know we're here.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. That's great. I was talking to a buddy on this podcast a couple episodes ago. That's won a state championship at Durango in Colorado, and he had something similar. It was a little different, but he had helmet stickers, and on the back he would have like stars for interception, touchdown, or whatever. But on the front, he had skull and crossbones for knockdowns, for hard hits. And it was the same concept. You can see it. You can see it add up over
Mm-hmm.
time. I love it, man. That's great stuff. How do you define success in your program?
Growth, positive growth. And again, we have some of our kids, for example, like have never played football before, and they show up, they might be soccer players or they might just be, casual fans, but they see, we do a lot of recruiting in the hallway sometimes. We'll walk around, we see a new kid or a kid that looks athletic or big and say, hey, you ever play football before? Like, no, well, come try it, and come check it out. Um, and so that kid is not going to have the same experience or the same outcomes and things that somebody who's been playing for 4 or 5 years. So we look at that individual and say, okay, like what are you doing compared to last week, compared to a month ago, and we try to track everybody's growth, and we celebrate. We like I said, I post a lot of things. Academics are big for us. And that's something that we tell the kids. Like, you may not have the the same genetics that some kid at Sci-Fair has, but you can go in there and crack the books and do your homework and write the papers just like anybody else in any school in America. And you can take control of your grades and your GPA. I love nominating kids for THSCA Academic All State. And I encourage all head coaches to do that. And because I think it's a great recognition. It's something that's for us is very easy to do. All we got to do is get their grades, get their test scores, and submit them on the portal. But then they get to take this certificate home with them that says I'm one of the best students in the state that also managed to participate in a sport, and things like that. Like those are really big deals. Scholarships. We have a lot of kids that they don't have the financial means to just get college paid for, and so I walk them through, whatever any scholarship email I get. Hey, apply for the scholarship. I look at the requirements and say, okay, which kid fits that, and I take it to that kid. I guide them through the process, write them recommendation letters, whatever I need to do. And we've had a couple of kids that win some pretty big scholarships last couple of years. And one kid last year who's a student at Texas Tech, he got a $10,000 scholarship from the Houston Texans. Um, you know, one of our kids this year got the Brothers in Arms scholarship. That's the foundation started by Warren Moon, Andre Ware, and Vince Young. And it's specifically for Houston area athletes come from a single parent home, because that's how they all were brought up. And it's this organization that, that's who they target. And one of our kids got that award, and he told me, he was like, coach, he's like, I never even heard about this, I wouldn't have known about this. And again, I'm not going to take credit, because he's the one that did all the work in the classroom. He's the one that took care of his stuff, and is a great person. But just the fact that I was able to show him that door, and then he walked through it, got this great recognition. Like I said, it's $7,500 for college. He wants to go to U of H and be an engineer. And again, somebody that's had some challenges, um, but those things I think can easily be overlooked. And in our job, it's very easy to try to lament the things that we don't have, as opposed to seeing the good things that are happening. So, um, any kind of growth, like I said, we do like to highlight it and show it to them. And I always use a phrase that, if there was a time machine and you could go back and meet the you from 6 months ago, you should be able to kick that guy's butt every single time. Like, that guy should almost not even recognize you, because of how much stronger, faster, smarter, and more mature you are just in the last 6 months. And I like to show them sometimes. I'll pull up pictures. Hey, this, every year when I go visit middle schools, I'll take pictures of the kids holding the little dry erase board with their names, so I can start learning who they are. And I love pulling those up for them. Like when they're freshmen, hey man, this is what you look like in 8th grade, and some of them are shocked. They're like, oh my gosh, I've grown so much. I can't believe I look so different. And every year I've done that to show them, hey, this like, you're gonna grow, you're gonna naturally mature and progress. And so take advantage of it, and whatever you can add to that, to the natural process, do it. And go take those classes that are a little challenging, and go get in the weight room and go challenge your teammate to a race after school. All those things, like, they're gonna help you. And when you combine your growth, that you accrue from hard work with what Mother Nature gives you, then that's when special things happen.
So my first job was down there in Brownsville Porter. For 2 years, I was at Brownsville Porter, and our DC my first year had just left Medina Valley, He had been the head coach at Mid Valley. He comes down, and we do the same thing that you're talking about with the dry erase board. We go to the middle school, name, and he wants them to take their shirts off. And these are like seventh grade kids, man. Half of them are coming over from Matamoros, and they're standing there with the dry erase board with no shirt on. I was like, man, I'm like 23, straight out of college. I'm like, dog, I don't know about this, man. And dude, it was funny. It was funny, but we ended up getting them as freshmen, even as freshmen, 2 years. So I was only down there 2 years, but showing them the growth from seventh grade to
Yeah.
freshman year, just showing what your body's going to do over that time, because you're not going to experience growth like that. You got to take advantage of it, dude. You got to eat,
Yep.
you got to work out, you got to train. Or someone were to see one of your athletes 10 years down the road, what would be the words you'd want to describe that player?
Tough. I think that being a Northbrook athlete just kind of naturally makes you tough. And I like to, that's something that I take pride in myself. And I think it's something that I like to really harness that in them. The fact that a lot of times they think situations are insurmountable, and there can be lots of things in your life that you think aren't possible. And I always remind them too that the quote that every single thing that's ever been done was once thought impossible until somebody did it. And I tell them the story of Roger Bannister all the time in the 4 Minute Mile, and how scientists
4 minute mile,
had
yeah.
said humans cannot run this fast, and so everybody believed it, and nobody thought twice about it. And then once he did it, everybody started doing it. And they realized it's just a mental limitation. So I like to show them those things, and we talk a lot about how you don't know how strong you can be until that's the only choice. And sometimes these kids, a lot of the kids have been through some tough challenges, and so lining up against the big Jersey Village kids or the big Cy-Fair kids doesn't really faze them, because they go home and face some even darker challenges in their home life, or with their parents, or with their families. And so it kind of forces you to be tough in these situations. So I think that's to me, that's a quality that's going to get you through anything. That nobody is ever going to have a perfectly easy life. Nobody's ever going to have a journey that's free of any burden. So I think that us teaching them how to handle things and how to move from one challenge to the other, and realizing that some battles, sometimes you're going to run into a better opponent and they're going to beat you, and that's it. But you can't dwell on it. You can't ignore it. You can't do anything but move on to the next thing, learn from it, and take those lessons that you learned and apply them to better yourself for the next time that something challenging comes up. And I tell them that every single one of them is going to get fired at some point, or get dumped, or have to face these things that just happen in life. And if they take these lessons during their time as Northbrook athletes and apply them to their life, that they're going to come out on top, and they're going to be for some of them right now, losing a game by a large margin might be the worst thing that could happen to them. And then they're going to go on in life and say, okay, well, this, lost my job, my wife left me, and, can't feed my kids. Well, that's much worse than a football game, but having learned how to, again, how to bounce back, how to overcome things, how to lean on each other, the aspect of being a team, I preach that daily, that they cannot do things by themselves. They have to lean on their teammates. And again, that's a basic tenet of life. None of us can do what we do by ourselves. We all have had help. We all are going to have help. And if they're able to see that, their life through the lens of the lessons that they've learned, then, I think that's why we do our job. That's why we are in the position that we are, so that we can show them these things that we've learned, And if we can get them ahead of the eight ball a little bit, before they get in these bad situations, and teach them how to process it, ahead of time, then I think that we will have been successful in what we're trying to do.
Tough is such a fluid adjective. That's a great one because, as you said, like it applies to different aspects of your life, and it's all based on perspective. And our kids, and you probably have kids worse, but I've been a Brownsville Porter, and we may have kids worse. But perspective to, I don't know, there's a million kids growing or going to wake up on a landfill in
Mm-hmm.
India. It's all about perspective, and just just being tough. And part of being tough is still playing within the rules. All right, things aren't going my way within the game, but I'm not going to be an
Mm-hmm.
embarrassment. I'm not going to get a personal foul. I'm not going to do something late. That's part of toughness,
Yep.
right? You with me on
Absolutely.
that? Same thing in life, right? Things aren't going well. I'm not going to go out and commit a crime, right? I'm not going to commit violence. I'm not going to hit somebody because I don't get my way. That's part of being
Yep.
tough. Doing things the right way over and over and over, no matter how frustrating or how repetitive it
Yeah.
is, all falls into toughness. Toughness is absolutely a perfect word if I were going to want somebody to describe my players. I'm glad you picked them.
Thank you. Yeah.
What has been the most difficult struggle for you in your time coaching?
Um, well, this one, yeah, actually, it's not directly in coaching, but it was just a struggle that my wife and I went through when we got married in 2010, and a couple of years later decided to start wanting to have kids, and there were some challenges, and we had some struggles, we had some infertility issues, we had a couple of miscarriages, where my wife would get pregnant, we get excited, and then a couple of weeks in, something would happen, and then we'd lose that baby, and the coaches love potential. We love thinking about what could be. And so, the moment you find out that you're going to be a dad, that's all you think about is what is this child going to be like? What can I be as a father? Um, and then, you feel like you get the rug pulled under you when you get those news, when you go into those doctor's appointments. And so we had, we had that for about 6 years, um, and during that time, I mean, I was obviously, like, that was my number one priority, was making sure that my wife was okay, making sure that our family was okay, and continuing to move through to this tough situation. And it's kind of like, I go back to, and when you took college classes and you learn about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you can't go into self actualization until you have your food, water, the basic. So
Security, yeah.
um, it's kind of where I was in my career, where I felt like I wasn't able to really do the things I needed to do as a coach, because I was rightfully spending a lot of time and energy on this family situation that was just very, very, very difficult. And um, fortunate now, we ended up um, having a pregnancy that, carried to term. We have our beautiful daughter Alexandra was born in 2019. We have another daughter now, Isabel, that's 9 months old. And so looking back, like I said, it's a struggle that we really were able to get through by leaning on each other. But that's really all we had, and it's something that our society, like, kind of really, this wasn't anything that was ever talked about very much, and I remember at the time thinking, man, we're probably the only ones that are going through this. And I mean, it's some crazy, like a fourth of our population has gone through this, and through infertility, miscarriages. I mean, it's a very, very common thing, but nobody talks about it, and so I remember, you know having those long sleepless nights, and then showing up to the office, and feeling like I had to just kind of put on my brave face, and go do my job. And I didn't really talk about this very much, with coworkers, and I worked with some, close friends of mine, but it still wasn't something that I felt like was able to really come up in conversation very, very easily in a coach's office or in a professional setting. And so it kind of felt very, very lonely. And, and I think that, again, it impacted just the way I approached coaching, teaching, and everything. But now that now that I'm on the other side, now that we have been able to start a family, and again, it was for me is later than most people. My daughter was born when I was 38. So I became a dad a little later than the average person. But now I feel like I'm way more able to handle you know as a head coach when an assistant coach comes to me and says, "Hey, coach, I need to go. This is happening at home," or whatever situations come up. I think as a leader, that has given me a lot of perspective of like, hey, you don't ever know what's happening in somebody's life, and you might think, oh, this person, is not a good coach, or he doesn't do their job well, or he's shows up late. But so you have to ask questions, and you have to know what's going on in your coaches and your players' lives, because they could be dealing with a similar situation. They could be going through a divorce. They could be having a child who's sick, and insurance is not cooperating, or whatever. I mean, you don't know what's going on, but having been through that experience and feeling like there was nobody that I could kind of talk to or turn to, uh, really again kind of impacted me now that I'm in this position to say, okay, well, let me take a step back, and whatever my initial reaction is of thinking that somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do the way they're supposed to do it, let's see if we can get to the root. Let's see if we can find out how we can help this person, this kid, this coach, and see what's going on that might be causing some of this stuff.
Absolutely. Give people the benefit of the
Yeah.
doubt. So, one more thing we have in common. In 2019, in that fall, uh, my wife lost twin
Oh,
girls to a miscarriage, and I had never missed a day of practice. And so the next day, it was like a Wednesday. I leave like around lunch or whatever. We had kind of known because on Tuesday they did the ultrasound, the heartbeats were real low, and so the next day I leave, and people don't know, right? So you come in on Thursday, and you got the coach that you're friends with, like, where the f were you yesterday?
yeah,
Like they don't know, and that kind of goes back to the toughness thing. Like, all right, we're all right, let's roll,
yeah,
man. It's all good. But man, that was during the season. That was right around Halloween. So I guess we're getting to the back end, week 6 or 7.
yeah,
Um, so we have that in common as
yeah.
well.
No, it's I said it, and it is. It's very common. I said it, and
It's and what sucks about it, and maybe I'm just insensitive, but from my standpoint, it was much harder on my wife because she was so connected
mhm,
to that situation biologically and psychologically than I was. Like it sucked for me, but that wasn't a part of
right.
me. I don't know if you went through that, but that was
Yeah,
tough.
yeah. It's we're it's more of a you got to be there as support because you don't know what she's going through. You don't know exactly affecting her,
Exactly.
and even and somebody told me this. It makes a lot of sense to me, but even the term miscarriage makes it sound like you did something wrong. Like and
Right.
we say we lost the baby. I got try not to use that term because it is so it does kind of imply, hey, you screwed up or something, and
Right.
and just the little things like that, and my wife is somebody that they would be very sensitive to that, and it was never easy, but yeah, you're right. The that component of she physically, literally lost a part of herself. When that would happen. I mean that's something that I can't ever fully understand, but yeah, it's definitely a challenge that a lot of people go through, and that we just we really need um, to be able to be open about, because yeah, like you said, when people don't know, they're just going to assume that hey, you just missed practice, for whatever reason, and they don't really know what's happening behind the scenes.
Yes, sir. Empathy. Empathy. All right, man. through the GHFCA, you recently started the Houston Coaches
Good.
Podcast. What was the inspiration for the show, and what has that experience been like?
It has been an unbelievable experience, and I'm just now, starting. It's only been going for a couple of weeks, but it's like I came up, you know, as a player in the '90s and started coaching in the early 2000s, and so it just seems like all over the area there was just all these coaches that have been at the same place for a long time, who were just perennial playoff coaches, and it was just like these guys that to me were larger than life, and I was fortunate, having been at Katy, that, guys like Don Clayton at Cinco Ranch, Chris Massey at Deer Park, they were assistants at Katy when I was there. Gary Joseph, of course, was a defense coordinator at Katy. And so when they were all leading their programs, I'd sell these guys, and I was like, man, those guys got it all figured out. That they're really smart. They're great leaders. And as I got into coaching and just kind of watched them, I was fortunate enough that last year I was chosen to be on the board of directors for GHFCA, and got to just sit in the same room with some of these guys. That Dick Olin, and Jim Creech, you mentioned earlier, like these guys that were instrumental in establishing the organization, and they still hang around, and they're always wanting to share stories and wisdom. And in one of our meetings, it came up. They said, hey, we got a lot of retired coaches who are still in the area, still want to be involved. And they said, at some point in the early days of the organization, they would have these roundtables where they would invite, coaches to talk about their experience, and, assistant coaches or whoever would come listen. But, it's just so hard to coordinate those things, and so hard to find a time when we're not coaching a second sport. We're not going to track meets. We're not doing all these things, outside of the season. So I proposed the idea. I said, well, what if, I said, I know me and my generation of coaches, we listen to podcasts all the time. That's all I listen to, audiobooks, podcasts, in my commute, or when I'm, walking the dogs or whatever. I always have my headphones on, always listening to something. I said, what if we could start something like that? What if we could, reach out to some of these retired coaches or, former head coaches, and just get their wisdom and record it on a podcast and put it out for people to listen to. And then everybody said, it sounds like a great idea. I love it. But again, it's an older group, so like, we don't know how to do that. So it sounds great, but how do we even start that? And I said, well, I'll research it. I'll find out, how, because it seems like, everybody's got a podcast these days. And so I said, let me do some research. Let me do some work.
Is that a shot at me or what? What do you mean everybody's got a podcast? Come on, man.
It's a great thing. It's I said, it's just a very popular medium right now to be able to share ideas and communicate. And so I said, it's something that, I thought that before I started it. Now that I'm in it, I say, okay, like it's a lot of work. It's not something that you can just, sit down and do one thing. I said, a lot of respect for you who got started a little bit before I did, and have really, kind of had this following, and have been able to put out episodes, and, great conversations with coaches. And like I said, just me getting to do that process, I've learned a lot, and I've gotten to really appreciate, the people that do put this content out. And so the idea was just to, try to connect a younger generation of coaches with the older guys who are, who have so much, and who really paved the way for us, who have fought for, keeping athletic periods, for all the things that we have that we sometimes take for granted. Like these guys were, right in the thick of things. So that's what we started doing. So far I've recorded 4 episodes, all with people who I've either worked with or mentored me in some way, or have been able to work through with GHFCA. But we want to continue to grow that platform, because I think the possibilities of growth are endless. When it's called the Houston Coaches Podcast, and so I can, like I said, it's starting with these retired guys who have been in the area for a long time, but I said we can evolve that to talk to current head coaches, talk to future head coaches, guys that want to be head coaches, get interviews with all these guys. We can reach out to the college coaches in the Houston area, or professional coaches. I have a friend of mine that's coaching for the Houston Roughnecks right now in the XFL, and so there's just a lot of different possibilities of people that we could talk to, and ideas that we could share. And I think that, for, people like us who are, just committed to growth and committed to learning. Clinic season is only, for a couple months there in January, February, and then you get into spring football. And um, we do have resources like YouTube and Glacier and some of these things that we can do. But a lot of times putting that personal touch of, hey, this is a guy that coached me in high school, or this is a guy that I knew growing up, or whatever. I think that is going to help kind of promote the ideas that we're trying to preserve to this new generation of coaches. And so that's just kind of the basis of it. And again, I'm very new to it, and I know that uh, as I've started, I'm realizing how little I know about producing shows and sound editing and some of those things that we don't that aren't really part of what we were trained to do. Uh, excuse me. So it's been a lot of fun.
I'm gonna have to sound edit that.
There you go. Exactly. It's been a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed the process, and I'm excited to see how we can keep it going, and what kind of conversations and nuggets I can get, and that's another reason why I'm very thankful to be on your podcast, because then I get to pick your brain and learn from you and kind of see how you do things, and how you guide conversations, and I want to really continue to do that in my own show, and hopefully we can continue to kind of learn from each other and grow our shows to get what the desired outcome that we want, which is to help others and to promote positive things.
One of the things that I think has been really interesting about doing the podcast is every single person has been really happy they've done it when it's over, because they've enjoyed it, because they don't have their phone. Like, their phone is off to the side. It's a one-on-one conversation. And I think people have really enjoyed that. And what's really been interesting to me, and you picked it also, was what has been most difficult struggle in your time coaching. Almost everyone has picked that.
Right.
It's been like, I want to get this off my chest. The last guy I had on, he's a coach at South Alabama, University of South Alabama, college coach. And he picked it, and his was moving. He had been to 8 jobs in 10 years.
Yeah.
It's
college
just, I think everybody wants a medium or an avenue to kind of say what they want to say without being interrupted, or without worrying about what somebody else is going to say about it. So I think that's what's been really refreshing about the podcast.
Yeah. And I remember, in my youth, I remember feeling like I was maturing when I realized that everybody's got a story. And, you always think about the cliche of, you're driving and somebody cuts you off and gives you the finger, and you think like, man, that
maybe they got a kid in the car that
right. You think that guy's a jerk. And then you realize, well, no, I don't know what's going on. Like that guy has a story.
Exactly.
And he just might have might be having a worse day than me, who just got cut off, and that's it. And so when you start looking at that at life through that lens, I mean, it's really hard to be a jerk, or to be inconsiderate to people, because you realize, man, nobody knows, and like I said, giving people a voice, giving people a platform is very powerful.
Yeah. And as a coach, you want your players to be accountable, and you want to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Mm-hmm.
But, you got to kind of gauge that. That's probably the biggest job as a coach.
Right.
Give them the benefit of the doubt, but also gauge, all right, what level of accountability are we willing to go to here with this individual?
Fine line,
based on their individual story.
Yeah.
I mean, how many dentists can you go to in 1 week?
Yeah. How many grandmas can get sick?
Yeah.
Hospital.
How many ants need to move? Exactly. All right, man. We're going to the 4th and 4, which is really good, because when I found out you were from Katy, my brain instantly assumed, like, okay, this dude plays safety at Katy. He's going to give me the Katy defense. But you were a wide receiver.
That's right.
All right, so you're going from the offensive standpoint. All right, there's 2 minutes left. You have no timeouts. Down 5 on the 50. Let's say the clock is rolling. It's 4th and 4. What's your thought process, personnel, formation, and play?
I'd want to go 20 personnel with a split back look, twins to the short side of the field, and we run. One of my favorite things to run right now is it's a bootleg with a flood concept, and so I think I would want to fake outside zone toward the twins, have the quarterback bootleg out and have the back that's to the twin side slip out into the flat and be the first option, and try to find those sticks, get the get the right depth. And now the quarterback has, if he sees it and that overhang player comes up to try to get the quarterback, he can dump it over his head, get the 4 yards. If that guy hangs back, quarterback athletic enough where he can go get those yards. Or, if everything falls apart there, we have the number 2 receiver from the twin side dragging across, and that typically is a very, very hard route to cover. And so I said, if your first option's not there and you can't, and there's somebody waiting for you there, you can always look back at that guy dragging and hit him over the middle and get that first down.
What's your outside receiver to the single doing?
He's going vertical. He's clearing.
He's going vertical.
Yeah.
Okay. But on this situation, you're reading it low to high.
Yeah, and so and that's that's your what you got in your back pocket is if they know it's 4th and 4 and you're going to try to attack those flats there, and that corner gets lazy, then you can just go ahead and take your shot down the field with that outside
and win the game. Win the game in one throw.
Yeah, so if they're expecting that that you're going to want to get that first down, then you got a deep threat right there.
I like it. Quarterback on the move. What I call a 3-level concept, which means we're going to have a high, a mid, a flat. Give our quarterback options, make a play. Don't get stuck in the pocket. Let's try to win the game. Perfect.
That's right.
I love it. Awesome, Coach. Tell listeners how to find you on social media.
I'm on Twitter. I said I'm at Gomezican, GOMEZICAN. Same on Instagram. Andres Gomez on Facebook, and I'm getting ready to put out to start a new Twitter account for the Houston Coaches Pod. So I'll start to try to build up a following through that. But that'll be here coming soon. But I love. Like I said, I'm a big fan of growth, big fan of learning. So, I love when people reach out and ask questions or want to know about, specific things or my story, whatever. I'm open to help whoever I can in any way that I can.
Thanks again, Coach. You can find me on Twitter at Coach Lawrence FB, as in football. Search 4th and 4 Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, and YouTube. Coach, it's been a great time. I'm sure I'll see you around soon.
Yes, sir. I really
appreciate it.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
You got it, brother. Later.
Thank you.